The Detroit Tigers signed Framber Valdez, bringing one of the best left-handers to the American League Central. We're going to tell you it is not enough why the Tigers will not win the AL Central in 2026.
Baseball is back. The Locked On Podcast Network presents the MLB season preview. All the biggest storylines and breakout stars for all 30 teams. Will the champs repeat, or will another team shock the league? From the experts at the Locked On Podcast Network, it's your team every day.
Welcome to the 2026 AL Central season preview, part of Locked On MLB's full division preview series. I'm Justin Lada, your host and voice of Locked On Guardians. We've got all 5 AL Central hosts here today. We're going to figure out which teams are making a splash and which teams are going to be trash. Let's get into it. The AL Central Division preview is brought to you by MLB The Show 26. Visit MLB.theshow/LockedOn. Use code LOCKEDON to unlock a pack for use in Diamond Dynasty. Available now on PlayStation 5, Xbox Series S and X, Nintendo Switch, rated E for everyone. We'll have on Scott Bentley of Locked On Tigers and division favorite Detroit, Jack Johnson of Locked On Royals and Kansas City's exciting lineup, CJ Baumgartner of Locked On Twins to discuss Minnesota's in-between offseason and year ahead, and Todd Welter of Locked On White Sox to discuss the South Side getting the number 1 overall pick in the 2026 MLB draft. And I'm Justin Lada, your host for today's division preview and Locked On Guardians, discussing Cleveland missing in action this offseason. Let's crack a pop, open, grab the ranch dressing, and get this Midwest party started. All right, introduce each other. We go around the horn, lightning style, 30 seconds each. Give me your team's win total. Over, under, we'll debate. Todd, you're on the clock. White Sox first.
I'm going to go with 75 wins because they're going to get the internal improvement that they're looking for, but there's still a big talent gap that they have to make up on. And gosh, I'm hoping I don't have to endure another 100-loss season.
Fair enough. Jack, are the Royals going to get back to the playoffs in 2026?
It's going to be really close. I got them right now at 86 wins, but it's going to be much tougher to get to the wild card this year because the AL East is so loaded, and you feel like maybe even 3 teams could get in from that division. They're going to have to be in the playoff hunt by the deadline, then make some moves for me to feel 100% confident, but I like them at 86 wins right now.
Scott, Tigers, are they going to reclaim the division, or are we going to have a repeat of 2025?
Well, I certainly hope not a repeat of 2025. I'm good on that for the rest of my life. But no, I honestly have the Tigers also around that 86 to 87 win total. I think that there's a lot to love about the starting rotation, but there are still a lot of questions in the lineup. So it's really cool and awesome to see, the Tigers that are favored a lot of places, but it's still really close at the top. And yeah, there's we all know how the AL Central can be sometimes. So
it do be like that sometimes in the AL Central. CJ Baumgartner, host of Locked On Twins, joining us for his first AL Central preview show. Are the Twins going to find their way back up? I know it was a quiet offseason. I think the only quieter offseason in the AL Central came out of Cleveland, CJ.
Yeah, I mean, I think right now this Twins team probably, if I'm being optimistic, probably wins somewhere in the high 70s range. And I think the biggest storyline all season will be, by the end of the year, is Joe Ryan and Byron Buxton still on this team. There was a little bit of talk in the offseason. Are they going to get traded? Is the sell-off going to continue? Pablo Lopez already out for the year with Tommy John. I think the high end for the Twins, if the starting pitching ends up being as good as they've been saying it should be, it can keep this club relevant enough. Still think they'll be sellers by the deadline, but I think that top prospects coming up, Walker Jenkins, Manuel Rodriguez, could give the lineup a shot in the arm to at least keep it competitive and be kind of close to below 500 rather than kind of the low 70s, high 60s win totals that some people kind of in the doomers are thinking in Twins territory.
Yeah, it's going to be a tough year around. And for the Guardians, I got to say it's around the same thing. I'm going to say it's around the mid-80s, 85 to 87 wins. But a lot of that's going to depend on whether or not their young hitters stay healthy, if they actually produce. They are really counting on a lot of young guys that have not stepped up in the past and have not stayed on the field, and they have to rely on their pitching once again. I don't know if they can find themselves in another September situation where they need to come back from 10 or more games out to make a playoff spot. So I'm going to say mid-80s, and I don't know if that's enough to make the playoffs, honestly, but it is the AL Central, so you never know. All right, win totals are on the board, gentlemen. Now the big question is who wins the division? If I'm being honest, the Guardians are the defending AL Central champs, but I am not going to walk in here and say they're favorites. Like I said, they're proving banking on a lot of unproven guys. Chase Lauder's got to stay healthy. They need someone to give Jose Ramirez some help. They signed Rhys Hoskins, whatever that's worth. The pitching's got to carry them. There's a lot of questions. So, Scott, you are on the hot seat I think the Tigers have the most pressure in this division in 2026. What do you think?
I would agree with that statement. I think that among all 5 of these teams, the team that we'd look back on and think that I would look back on at least and think it was the biggest disappointment if they did not win the division would be Detroit. I mean, they'll be my pick just for like Homer's sake, but it's not something that I am uber confident in. At the same time, I think there's the Royals have a like potential 10-win player. Like that's like hard to like necessarily just be like, oh yeah, like there's no chance of that. They have good pitching and they have one of the best players in the sport. We know what the Twins have done when they've been healthy in the past, and like Cleveland is Cleveland. They could have the worst roster in baseball, and I project them to win 85 games and beat us 1-0 7 times a year. So like it's one of those things. And I honestly, respect to the White Sox, I really like their offseason. Like I think that it is a situation where all eyes are kind of on you. You've spent the most in the division. You have the biggest maybe storyline in the entire division at the top of your rotation. And there's a lot to like, but it also certainly, you hope that pressure makes diamonds in this case.
So are they the division champions in 2026?
Yeah, again, I'll say yes just for the sake of not having my own listeners get mad at me and trying to like justify not. I won't stand in the way of that take. I'm also not saying it with like the most confidence, and as you can tell behind it, I think that it'll be a pretty tight race up top.
Jack, host of Locked On Royals. The Royals took a little bit of a step back last year. Where are they going to finish in the division in 2026?
Yeah, it's funny. Scott said that he had, listeners get mad at him. I had people that were mad at me last year when I picked the Tigers to win the division, and I felt great about the pick for about 90% of the season. And then, of course, we saw what Cleveland did at the very end. I'm still going to go with Detroit here. And the reason being that offensively, they're the team that I think has the fewest question marks. Now, I totally agree with Scott about Cleveland. I mean, you can't rule them out because they seem to just get in that 85 to 90 win territory every single year, regardless of what the offense looks like. But with Kansas City, and we've been talking about this all offseason long, you've got a great core with Bobby Witt Jr. and Vinny Pasquantino and Michael Garcia. Pitching wasn't healthy last year. They've upgraded in the bullpen. Offensively, though, that's going to be the difference maker. And I can't just play this, it might happen, so I'm going to pick them to win the division. If I'm going with this decision, Detroit just feels like the safest bet, where they finally add that true number 2 for Tarik Skubal. I like their bullpen. And offensively, there's just a lot of high floor guys, where in Kansas City and Cleveland, you're more so looking at a top-heavy lineup. And then there's question marks about what the bottom half can do.
CJ, who do you got in the AL Central in 2026 from Twins territory?
Yeah, I think we got to keep the train moving with the Tigers. I mean, I think that coming into the offseason that they were going to be the pick to do it again, and especially right before spring training, bringing in Framber, I think just notched that up just a little bit. And I think that just overall, they have the deepest pitching staff. They have some of those high-end players. I think overall, they're my pick to win the division. And that being said, to join also in the conversation with you guys, there is a thing on Twins Twitter. I don't know if you guys have heard about it, where they talk about the Guardian Devil Magic. And I mean, I just can never count out the Guardians until the season is over, because they always somehow end up right in that mix or second, but winning a playoff series. So I think it does come down to Cleveland and Detroit, but I'm going to give Detroit the edge because they just have had a better offseason and have really rounded out some of the spots of their roster.
Twins fans do not like Guardians Devil Magic. That has been a massive thing the last couple of years. I can't use the words I really want to use there, but that has gotten ugly the last couple of years. We need a little humanity back into that. I agree. The Guardians do have the Devil Magic. I can't pick them to win the division. I have to pick the Tigers. I'm sorry. We're going to all jinx Scott here, but the Guardians don't have the hitting. Like Rhys Hoskins was their biggest offseason addition, and they're counting on Chase Lauder, a guy who's never played 60 games in a pro season ever, to come up and transform their offense. I can't imagine that happening. Now, I suppose it could happen. CJ, we can ask you what the Twins did last year, what magic spell they cast to give Byron Buxton a healthy season, and see if we can hop on, platform 9 3/4 and find it. But if they don't, it's not going to happen for Cleveland. So I'm picking the Tigers to win the division as well. Todd, do the White Sox fans even care about who wins the division? You guys are just waiting until July, right, for the draft? No, who wins the division?
I'm going to go with the Tigers too, just because actually, one of the things that has actually come down to the AL Central race probably the last 2 years has been, how do you beat up the White Sox and gain extra wins against the White Sox? Like, remember in 2024, the Twins had 12 wins, I believe, against the White Sox. The Royals got 12 wins against the White Sox. So, and I think the Tigers had like 10. So, beating up on the White Sox has actually been one of the magic cure-alls, where on the flip side, the Guardians actually did beat, I think, the White Sox plenty in 2025. So if the White Sox can take away maybe being that, margin thing, I just like the Tigers pitching and the lineup to get those extra wins you need to win the division outside of the AL Central, beating some teams in the AL West, beating some teams in the AL East. And now that the Tigers, they have to win this year. Otherwise, you will have totally pooched having Tarik Skubal, because I'm sorry, I don't see him returning. If you're lowballing him already, what makes you think you're going to outbid the Dodgers in whatever new CBA world we'll have in the next time when Skubal is there? So they have to go all in to win the whole thing, I think. And I just, again, I go back to, they have raised floor players. They've just got more of a solid lineup. Although I wouldn't count out the Royals, just because, again, Bobby Witt Jr. is God, and I don't know what Fangraphs' projection is running. They need to they need to program in plus wins for the Guardians, because I will never believe the Guardians will ever finish with 70 to 75 wins on their projections until I actually see it. Otherwise, they're always penciling into me. I'm penciling them in to always win 85, because they find the voodoo magic. They find the way to score those runs, win those 1-0 games, and survive on Jose Ramirez and pitching.
They do survive on that every single year somehow. All right, Todd brought up a good point. Framber Valdez, is he enough? Are the Tigers all in on a season that might end Tarik Skubal's time in Detroit? The move that changes everything right after this. Every year, I'm excited about the release of MLB The Show. I'm thrilled to be talking about them as our sponsor for today's AL Central preview on Locked On. The greatest game in baseball is back with its newest installment. Baseball fans, I know you're going to have a hard time pulling yourself away from this game. Take control of your AL Central team in franchise mode. Bring a World Series winner home to one of us, so it's not the Dodgers again, please. Or check out Diamond Dynasty to play as some of your favorite AL Central legends. Travis Hafner, if you're a gamer, a baseball fan, or just want to enjoy America's favorite pastime in a new, exciting way, you're going to love MLB The Show. Play as your favorite team and franchise players. See if you have what it takes to bring home your own World Series. Visit MLB.theshow/LockedOn. Use code LockedOn to unlock a pack for use in Diamond Dynasty. Internet connection required. Available now on PlayStation 5, Xbox Series S and X, and Nintendo Switch. Baseball the way it should be. Rated E for everyone. Opening day for MLB is almost here. I know you feel the excitement with us, the fresh starts, the big expectations. Whether it's that breakout rookie you're looking forward to seeing or the AL Central Division race that will probably go down to the wire, there's nothing like being at the ballpark with it. The only problem is getting tickets feels like a grind, especially on opening day. It's hard to find the right seat, and you get surprise fees where prices are jumping at checkout. And that is where there's Game Time. The Game Time app gives fans the advantage with constant innovation. It's how you unlock amazing tickets and experiences in just a few taps. Simple to use. Game Time Guarantee guarantees you get 100% authentic tickets delivered on time at the best price, and fees are included in the price you see. So what you see is what you pay, period. I use Game Time on all the best deals for the events I go to: baseball, concerts, anything I want to do last minute. Take the guesswork out of buying MLB tickets. No stress, no hidden fees, just great seats and minutes with 2 taps. Download the Game Time app, create an account, use code Locked On for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create the account, use code Locked On, LOCKEDON, for $20 off. Download the Game Time app today. All right, gentlemen, I hope you took your antacids. Let's start spicy. What was the worst offseason move in the AL Central? I will go first because it's the Guardians. They did absolutely nothing. They had the worst move. They sat on their hands and they said, oh, Rhys Hoskins, you're in Goodyear. Why don't you grab a locker and grab some gear and grab a bat and see what happens? That was their move. I mean, they signed Sean Armstrong, which they needed bullpen help because they, lost their closer because he's federally indicted right now and going through court. That's awesome. So they decided, you know what, we'll sign a 35-year-old reliever who was good last year, and then we'll sign Rhys Hoskins, who wasn't even on the Brewers playoff roster, and we'll hope that the guy who hasn't played 60 games in his life will be a transformation in the lineup. So I think the Guardians made the worst move of the division this offseason because they did nothing. Scott, your team arguably had the best offseason, the Tigers. Who had the worst move this offseason? Because I know it didn't come from Detroit.
Yeah, I really, while you were talking, was trying to think of like any other angle to have here, but I really am having a hard time. You have a Cleveland team that has a core, right? A foundational piece. You have J-Ram, you have the pitching development they've had, even if it's not the same as it was, like 7-8 years ago, like it's still solid. Like you have these young players coming up and you have their last 2 seasons were like the historic comeback last year. Year before that, they were the 1 seed in the American League, 2 seed. Like they have had back-to-back division titles and really successful seasons without investing too much into the lineup and into the rotation. And they lose the best closer on the planet, and their their corresponding move is to do nothing. And I cannot fathom the frustration that fan base goes to seeing a back-to-back division title team just have zero investment from the front office put in it in a year in which a lot of the other top contenders for the AL Central crown did invest, even, from the Tigers perspective, heavily invested, right? Framber has the highest AAV from a lefty starter in the history of baseball. Like, that there is something that is incredibly frustrating about a team that is so close to getting over the hump doing absolutely nothing. And I really don't have another angle for you than just kind of repeating what you said.
No, you could be a Guardians fan. You fit right in. That just is the summation of the Cleveland off season. Yeah, no, I don't blame you on that for any Cleveland sports, honestly. Not to get our own fan base riled up here. Jack, Lockdown Royals. The Royals had a kind of a busy offseason. You took one of the Guardians outfielders, but what was the worst move of the offseason? I also don't think it was the Royals either.
I don't want to keep just piling on and give the same answer, so I feel like I got to have some creativity here. The one that I was surprised about, because my college roommate is a diehard Twins fan, and he always sounds off about all things Twins. And what he was so mad about, and I'm going to voice his concern here, that there wasn't really a path picked. Like, you keep Buxton, you keep Joe Ryan, you keep Pablo Lopez, who's now hurt, and you're not really selling, but then you're not really going for it. And I can speak to this too, because the Royals did it for about 4 to 5 years at the very tail end of Dayton Moore's run, where it was this, we're out of the rebuild phase, we've got a good young core, and then they'd go sign a Jordan Lyles, or they'd go sign somebody that really didn't move the needle. And you can't fool smart fans out there. They know if you're really trying to go for it or not. And for Minnesota, as tough as it is to sell off homegrown talent, I thought either at the deadline last year or this offseason, it would have been that commitment to, we're fully rebuilding, or we're actually going to try to build around him. And they did the worst thing you can do, which is not do anything.
Pick a lane. CJ from Lockdown Twins, what say you? Did the Twins not pick a lane this offseason?
No, they did not. Everything is spot on. That's exactly how the fan base is feeling. And it goes deeper because it goes to ownership, because ownership was trying to sell the team. And then everybody thought when they sold off all the pieces, it was because the sale was imminent. And then they pulled the team off the market. And then they brought in some minority investors because allegedly the club was nearing $600 million in debt, which I have no idea how you do that. But that's a different case entirely. That could be its own episode. But yeah, they decided that they were going to sell off all these pieces, which fine. But the Twins president of baseball operations at the time, Derek Falvey, reportedly did not want to tear it down. That was a mandate from ownership. So you kind of saw this. The front office wanted to keep going with the vision they were building. Ownership was trying to hemorrhage money any way they could. And then by the time the minority investors came in, it was late December. And then ownership was like, okay, we won't sell anymore. So then they got themselves stuck in the middle. And now they replaced the head of ownership with a guy named Tom Pohlad, who's a brother of the guy that they just kicked out. It's a very weird scene. And basically, my thing of that is they didn't decide, because there were reports of Byron Buxton, Joe Ryan, and Pablo Lopez getting moved in the winter, and all of a sudden that stopped. And then it's like, okay, you're going to go for it. They've been signaling, the head of ownership is signaling, we're going to go for it. We don't want to be half measures. No half measures was a famous quote. Another one is, I'd like to get off this payroll thing for a second, which didn't go over well with the fan base. But I think the biggest thing for the Twins, they're my most disappointing move, because they were like, okay, we're going to win. We're going to do this. And then they sold off 6 pieces of the bullpen, all of them being really, really good major leaguers. And their only major league bullpen addition was Taylor Rogers, who is a very effective pitcher, but is not a closer. And they needed a closer, 2 high setup men, all this stuff to fill the bullpen. And it's been a lot of Andrew Chafin's and Anthony Bonda's and a bunch of different kind of half measures to tie up the bullpen with a floor that I don't know how high it is, but yeah, it's this thing of, if you're not going to sell and you are going to go for it, you're going to need a reliever, like a single reliever. And right now, I think there's a weird hope that Liam Hendricks is going to be the closer come the end of April.
Ooh, all right. That's a lot to put on Liam Hendricks' shoulders. Todd, who had the worst offseason? What was it like to not watch your team have the worst offseason?
Well, actually, I could make an offer of who actually, like, the worst off-season move was the White Sox trading Luis Robert Jr. only because of the look when the general manager thought he traded for a switch hitter who is not a switch hitter. That was a pretty bad look, although they kind of had to trade Luis Robert Jr. at some point because the club control wasn't running out. The Guardians, look, I mean, they barely make moves and they keep winning the division. So at some point it's going to, maybe time's going to run out, but if it's been working, why change it? I will go, I'll piggyback on the Twins not selling. I mean, first of all, the White Sox come in with a boss move by pulling Justin Ishbia interest away from the Twins. I think you have to counter that in some way by still selling the team. Now, the rumor was, the debt load kind of scared people off, but again, it's a baseball team. If you run it right, you can print money. And especially the Twins with that publicly financed ballpark, you could be raking in cash if you want to, and also with the CBA. So what they should have done is maybe they should have done like what the Guardians have done. You sell a piece with eventually selling controlling interest to pay down some debt, or like the White Sox are doing. I think the Twins are at a crossroads where they either should have just tore it all down, got as much prospects as they could, with a chance of turning around things quickly, because they do have, I respect the heck out of their farm system with the guys that they got. They can get things turned around. Like I've already predicted, who's going to be running the division in 2029? The White Sox and the Twins. We're getting back to, battling it out like we used to, 2 decades ago because of the farm systems that they have. But I think the Twins could have taken it a step further and just sold completely off, got themselves back and ready to go to compete by the end of the decade, where the Guardians, hey, if it's been working, I know it's frustrating, Justin, but it's working for them. So why change now?
Because 85 wins and hope and Jose Ramirez and bubblegum is just not enough.
But October's variance, man. It's all about variance.
Yeah, I'd like to have a little bit less variance in my Octobers, man. My heart can't really handle it. I just turned 37, okay? I don't want to have a heart problem by 40 because I'm just waiting on random variance in October. All right, who had the best move of the offseason and why was it Framber Valdez? And Scott, is that enough to maximize 2026, possibly Tarik Skubal's last season? How much pressure is on the Tigers to make a deeper run?
I think, as we kind of said at the beginning of the show, right? Like I'm looking at this through, tiger striped glasses, obviously, but I really do think that this is the year that the most pressure is on the Tigers. This is a team that, like, they've made the playoffs the last 2 years in a row. You had the magic comeback in 2024 and then the historic collapse in 2025. But, found yourself in the postseason both years. They haven't won the AL Central since 2014. That was the last division title the Tigers had. It's been over a decade. And, you bring Verlander back. Maybe there you go. You got some good vibes. But, like, it's one of those things where I do believe that Valdez is – at least within the American League Central, is certainly the biggest addition, and I would like to think, I hope it certainly is the best. But yeah, there's a ton of pressure on this team, and it's not from the pitching side, right? There's a lot of confidence there, and I think that when you look at team success and team consistency, I guess is the better word, over 162, a lot of that comes back to pitching. Right, the offenses do this, right? There's roller coasters, there's hot streaks, there's cold streaks. If you can prevent runs at a good clip, you're going to be in every game and you're going to stop those long losing streaks and whatnot. And so, yeah, I expect them to have a good regular season. As I said at the beginning, I think they should be the favorites to win the division. And I think Framber certainly has a lot to do with that and kind of rounding out and making this rotation not only one of the best in the AL Central, but I think genuinely one of the best rotations in all of baseball. So there's a lot of excitement, but there's still a lot of questions. Riley Green struck out like 220 times or whatever last year. Like there's a lot of questions still about what ceiling the offense has. We talked about the floors with the bats and how there's some optimism there, but is this a team that is going to have really good pitching and be the 15th ranked offense, or is this a team that can be truly a top 10 in both of those departments? I think that is where a lot of the question marks and concerns still lie for Detroit.
Jack, Lockdown Royals, who had the best offseason move in the division? Now, the Royals were pretty active, but what was the best offseason move in the AL Central?
I'm going to stay with Detroit as well, but I'm actually not going to pick Framber Valdez. I thought the pickup of Kenley Jansen was incredibly underrated because last year, I'm not sure I looked at Detroit and said the rotation was the issue. I mean, it's easy to say that because Tarik Skubal clouded a lot of it because he was so unbelievably impressive. But there were times where the bullpen was shaky, and because Kenley Jansen was on a bad team last year, he flew under the radar, and you go and look at the numbers, they were incredibly good. And what Kenley Jansen allows the Tigers to do is kind of now mix and match the back end of the bullpen, where I thought last year when there were those struggles, it was like, let's roll with Tommy Kahnle as long as we can, right? Or let's roll with Vest as long as we can. And now you've got that true, probably Hall of Fame closer that's still contributing at a high level where everybody else can kind of exhale and go, all right, I'm not the guy. I'm just the guy to bridge the gap to Kenley Jansen. And by the way, I think his overall stuff is going to play incredibly well at Comerica Ballpark, play well behind that defense. Framber Valdez was an excellent signing, but that Kenley Jansen one is a move that I think midsummer we're going to say, man, how did the Tigers get Jansen for that amount? Because he's been one of the better closers in the American League.
Yeah, well said. CJ Baumgartner, Locked On Twins. We have two Tigers nominated as the best offseason AL Central move. Do you feel the same?
Yeah, I'm going to give the tiebreaker to the Framber signing because I think overall, as much as Jansen's important, and yeah, that Tiger bullpen needed help for sure. I think when you get to the playoffs and what helps you really push is having as deep a starting pitching as you can, and especially guys who you can hand the ball off to in any situation, a game 1, a game 5, a game 7, whatever it may be. And Framber is, I think, just going to take that rotation to another level, pair him up with Skubal. I know Verlander's still kicking around, but there was a thing when the Tigers traded at the deadline. They traded for Chris Paddock, and Twins fans are like, okay, yeah, have him. And I think Paddock had one of his worst starts as a Tiger against the Twins, and Twins fan, no disrespect to Chris Paddock, but it's one of those where it's like the Tigers last year were trying to fortify their rotation for a playoff run with Chris Paddock, and that's not exactly the arm you want to get. And I think they learned their lesson with that, which is why they had an opportunity to go get Framber. They did. And starting pitching is very random, but bullpens are more random. And where the Jansen thing, I think, could work out very well for them, and I think will be a good player for them. But bullpen arms are weird. They're like kickers in the NFL. They can have some years where they're out of the world and some years where they stink. And it's just kind of it's a lot of variance with that position group. And I think starting pitching just is a lot kind of more stable. And I think come playoff time, the more starting pitchers you have that can start like that, it can move your back end guys to the bullpen and you can kind of backfill from that way. So I think both signings are good, but it's why I give the edge to Framber.
Yeah, a bad bullpen is probably the worst thing you can have. Nothing's more frustrating than blowing 20 leads in a year. All right, Todd, are we going to make this chalk? Is it the Tigers? Did they have the best offseason move in the division?
I'm going to be contrarian just for the heck of it because of context. Munetaka Murakami signing with the White Sox, I actually think is the best move just because of the fact that the White Sox actually read the market correctly. This was a guy, a Japanese slugger that everybody was thinking was going to get $150 million. A lot of people were scared off by his swing and miss issues. And the White Sox swoop in and get him for $34 million on a 2-year deal. And if he turns out to actually be what he was in Japan, where he, was the single season home run leader, all-time home run record for a Japanese-born player hitting 56 home runs at the age of 22. If he turns out to be that, that's a superstar on a super cheap deal. And then, I know the current owner probably wouldn't extend him, but the next owner who would be coming into power at that time would be able to extend him. You might have a legit superstar that you just read the market correctly. I'm not saying that Framber Valdez, I think, was a great move for the Detroit Tigers. And I think the Detroit Tigers had a great offseason. I'm just saying, when you look at it in the context, it was like the Tigers like, hey, we got to fortify our starting rotation. And why not we use money instead of prospects? Because wasn't it the Tigers GM, Scott, that was complaining about like, well, we couldn't make these trades at the trade deadline because we would have had to have given up prospect number 2, prospect number 5, all those prospects, so why not fortify your rotation by just spending money, which they did, so that's why I think I'm throwing Munetaka Murakami out there because, hey, if he does bust, okay, you've got a quick exit ramp. If he succeeds, you've got a superstar, and you were willing to take the gamble where other teams like, I don't know if I can take that gamble.
Yeah, if there's ever a salary cap, which I don't want to get into on this because that's for next year's talk, but if there ever is, you guys are all in trouble because Cleveland will totally take advantage of that. But if the White Sox ever get an owner that knows how to spend like they actually are located in Chicago, we are all screwed in this division. So that'll be a lot of fun. I think there's no doubt that Framber Valdez was the best, most impactful move this offseason. I'll cheat a little, and I'll say the most underrated offseason, though, in general, was the White Sox. I agree. I didn't want to snipe Todd there. That's why I let him go before I did. But I think the White Sox had a good offseason. I do. I think they made the right moves for where they are in terms of their rebuild. They could, Murakami could turn out to be a great signing and be really good and dangerous. They've got a good farm system. They're going to pick the best player in the draft this year. And they've got a lot of tradable assets, too. They went out and added, Sir Anthony Dominguez. They added some guys they can flip at the deadline for more prospects. So I think they had an offseason that was properly framed in where they are. Unlike the Twins, they picked a lane. They know where their lane is. Now they got to execute it and hopefully not let Jerry Reinsdorf get his grubby little fingers all over it before they can do it. All right. Which team could make a splash? Which team is going to be trash? The 2026 AL Central Bowl predictions right after this. You've got workplace chaos, deadlines are stacking up, your inbox is overflowing, and the one position you have to fill is still sitting open. When the pressure's on, you need the right hire, and that is a job for Indeed sponsored jobs, helping you reach the people who actually fit what you're looking for with the skills, experience, and locations. So you're not just hoping the right candidate stumbles across your post. And the stat that says it all, in the minute we've been talking, companies like yours have made 27 hires on Indeed, according to Indeed data, worldwide. So if you're hiring, spend less time searching and more time interviewing candidates who check all your boxes with Indeed sponsored jobs. That's less time searching, more times interviewing candidates who check your boxes, right? Less stress, less time, more results. Cut through the chaos. That is a job for Indeed sponsored jobs. Listeners of this show will get a $75 sponsored job credit to help get your job the premium status it deserves at Indeed.com/podcast. Go to Indeed.com/podcast right now. Support this show by saying you heard about it on Indeed on this podcast. Indeed.com/podcast. Terms and conditions apply. Need to hire? This is a job for Indeed sponsored jobs.
Hey, this is Jeff Carr from Locked On Reds. And I've reached the point in my life where my wife and I are looking toward the future. We've got the house, we've got the career, we even have an awesome dog, but now we need to secure that future. That's where Ethos comes in for us. When I look at this insurance or that insurance and I try to pick one, I might as well be reading an entirely different language. Ethos clears up the noise and gets me set up with exactly what I need, because Ethos makes getting life insurance fast and easy, and it's 100% online. You can get a quote in seconds, apply in minutes, and get same-day coverage. Protect your family with life insurance from Ethos now by going to ethos.com/lockedonmlb. In as little as 10 minutes, you can get a free quote and up to $3 million in coverage at ethos.com/lockedonmlb. That's ethos.com/lockedonmlb, ethos.com/lockedonmlb. Application times and rates may vary.
Welcome back to Locked On MLB's AL Central preview for 2026. We've got Jack Johnson of the Royals, CJ Baumgartner of Locked On Twins, Todd Welter of Locked On White Sox, Scott Bentley of Locked On Tigers, and myself, Justin Lada of Locked On Guardians. We are part of the Locked On Podcast Network. We cover your team every day, and you can find us everywhere you get podcasts for absolutely free. And you can always find us on YouTube. Make sure you subscribe to get the latest episode of your favorite team's podcast. All right, let's go back to who's starting on the hot seat in 2026. Not a name. I want a name, not a vibe, a manager, GM, front office. Who is a bad month or few months away from getting the call? I don't think there's a lot of pressure on the Royals, but I'll start with you, Jack.
Gosh, a hot seat for somebody in the Central. I mean, we could probably make a case that no manager, right, is in danger of losing their job. There's, Stephen Vogt, who's now won the division back-to-back years. He's been, an excellent fit for what Cleveland's wanted. Matt Quattro's in no danger either. AJ Hinch certainly is in no danger, and the Twins and White Sox are still very early on into their tenures with their managers. So unless you just have something crazy go down, right? You have a team that, like the Tigers or the Royals, that were supposed to be near the top of the Central, bottom out and lose, give or take 110 games, 115, then I guess we could have that conversation. But this is one of the first times in a while that I can think of where no manager is in danger, barring some unbelievable epic collapse. I guess if I was to pick somebody, though, it would be in Chicago, maybe. But then again, I would say that why would you, right? If the White Sox lose 95 games, I still think they are building a young core. They are building toward the future. And you're not going to can a manager when they're still outmatched by a lot of teams in this division.
CJ from Locked On Twins, you guys already fired your manager. Your GM is also out on the street now, too, a former Guardians GM. So nobody should be under pressure there. So who do you think is on the hot seat in the AL Central?
Well, I'll counter that. I will say that I think that, like we talked about before, it was a big leadership kind of disagreement with the Twins. It's why President of Baseball Operations Tarik Skubal stepped down like a week before spring training began, and Jeremy Zoll, who is the Twins general manager, now is the head baseball guy. He's super young. He was kind of the left-hand man of Falvey, right-hand man of Falvey. I don't know what he played college baseball. I think he was a catcher. He's probably a right-hander. But looking at him, he's kind of just in this position because nobody else is. And you could very well see with the new head of ownership coming in, who knows that the poll ads are going to be owning this team for 1 year, for 5 years, for 50 years. But you could very well see that Rocco Baldelli was the fall guy for last year's collapse. Now, Falvey's gone, and you could very much have saw a world where the Twins underachieved and Derek Falvey was let go anyway. So I think he just decided to cut bait before they gave him that opportunity. But I think Jeremy Zoll could still be that guy, not so much because he is going to be bad in his position, but if you already cleared out the guy at the top, the number two is pretty much just filling in for the meantime. Do at the end of the season, if the Twins, especially if they underachieve and have to sell, do they continue to go in that rebuild path and pick that lane and just decide, well, if we're going to do that, we're going to the guy who's running ownership is going to get in the person he hand selects. So if we're going executives, I think Jeremy Zoll would be one to watch. Not that I think it's going to happen, like a gun to my head right now, but I think that there's a very real chance that this team underachieves, that they just decide to clean the front office entirely.
Todd, is anybody on the hot seat in Chicago, or who do you think is on the hot seat in the AL Central?
Nobody's on the hot seat in Chicago. I mean, Chris Getz is Jerry Reinsdorf's hand-picked GM and one of the worst GM searches you'll ever see. He didn't interview a single candidate. He just gave the job to Chris Getz. And Will Venable, was considered one of the brightest manager candidates coming into 2025. So they're pretty much safe right there. The only thing that I can even think of is just the temperature maybe being turned up would be, let's say the Tigers have another collapse. Does AJ Hinch's seat get a little bit hotter on there? That would be one thing that I could just throw it out there. I just know Scott's mentions in the YouTube channel will just be through the roof if they have another collapse, and he'll have to deal with, those passionate Tigers fans being like, what the heck is going on? But no, I mean, I echo what Jack said. I just don't see anybody really being on the hot seat in terms of a general manager or in terms of a manager, except for, again, like maybe if Detroit falls short possibly, or maybe if Cleveland, has 50 wins for some reason. I don't see that happening. So yeah, it doesn't make any sense to me that anybody would be on the hot seat. I could just see a temperature getting a little bit warmer.
A gambling scandal could not take down anybody in Cleveland. So I think everyone is safe over here. Scott, I think you've said it before. You've said it. The most pressure in the division is on the Tigers, but I just can't see a world where anybody there truly is on the hot seat. I think it would take like a very very poor season. Like you'd almost need like a fried chicken and beer kind of season ending for anybody to get fired in Detroit. Are they the only ones that are even close down the hot seat? Or is there somebody else you think?
Yeah, to be honest, I don't think there's. I think the pressure for Detroit to win is, this is going to sound super cliche, but like mostly on the players. Like I you know what I mean? It's just one of those situations. Like there's not too many people out there that are like, man, AJ Hinch is the problem. Like, you know what I mean? Like it's just I think I am the biggest like AJ Hinch slappy you'll find. I think he's one of the best managers in the sport. The front office, there are a handful of, Scott Harris haters, I guess I'll call them. And, but in terms of like actual pressure, no, I don't think that there's pressure from ownership, I guess I should say, on really anybody in that regard in the Tigers, but there are on the players themselves. So from a front office or managerial thing, I completely agree with Jack. I don't think any manager is on the seat. I do kind of agree with CJ a little bit on the Twins side of things. And I want to throw Cleveland in there just because I want to, but I agree with you. I think that they're probably all, locked and ready to roll. But I do think that like Minnesota has been, they have just like, no disrespect, but they have just handled everything so poorly the last 20 months. It is mind-boggling to me, like the lack of picking a lane. I know we've talked about a lot, but even I mean dating back to like 2 years ago when like they had Correa and then they were trying to trade him and then they were like, oh, the TV rights completely screwed us and now we have no money. Like they have continuously screwed this up for the better part of 2 calendar years. And so I think that there is kind of a world where, again, not anything necessarily on the field unless they do finally sell, but or anything in the coaching staff or on the manager side of things. But I could see them just being like, you know what, we're finally going to actually pick an effing direction and just clean house in the front office and start over again. That if there is a most likely scenario, I guess that's the one I'm picking. But I do agree with Jack that I'm not sure anybody in this division is really on the hot seat going into the year.
Yeah, the most mid-division in the entire sports world or entire MLB. Nobody is on the hot seat. Of course, we're all fine with 85 wins in this division. We're the Midwest. All right, splash or trash. Who could win 80 games? You wouldn't be surprised. Who could win 60? I think outside of the Tigers, I think everyone in the division could possibly win 60, and I think every team in the division could win 80 as well. Who's else? Which one of you has a hot take on that?
I don't have necessarily on the 80 win part because I agree with you. I like this is the first year where even if the White Sox pushed like 80 and had like 77, 78 wins, I wouldn't be completely stunned. I love their offseason a lot. But the one that I will throw out there, I feel like a Twins hater, CJ, no disrespect at all, but I will go with, if there is a team that, maybe the like more casual fan doesn't see coming, them like completely bottoming out. There's always a team that we don't talk about that is really good, and there's always a team that's really bad, right? And I really do think that it is not super far-fetched for the Twins to be not only 5th place in the AL Central, but like, competing with the Angels for like one of the worst records in the American League. I don't think that is some reality super far in a land far away. Like I think that that's somewhat on the table. And so that'll kind of be the team that I go, if there's, would it shock me? No, it really wouldn't.
I mean, the ceiling for the White Sox is to replicate what the Marlins did last year and get to 79 wins, and I can potentially see it happening. I've seen, I think it was Dave Schoenfeld throwing out, hey, the White Sox are going to be like the 2022 Orioles and win 83 games. I think that's a little bit too much, but, following what the Marlins did is, I think, replicable, but also at the same point, the White Sox, they had a decent second half, and that was it. They still have to prove that they can actually make this leap that they're all assuming. So they could be stuck in neutral. Wouldn't shock me on that one, but I will go with this. And I have kind of seen, I could see though the Twins being the team. And yeah, I don't mean to hate on you, CJ, but I do think they are the team that if there's going to be a team that's going to bottom out, it's them, because again, they haven't picked a lane. And the cards could stack up where, again, Byron Buxton has another year where he plays like 90 games. But again, they all come against the White Sox, and he makes his case to be a Hall of Famer against the White Sox because he absolutely crushes them. But that could happen where, yeah, the Twins bottom out. So I could see them being the team that doesn't hit the 80 wins, but reaches the 60 win mark.
Yeah, I think the Twins are the team of variance, right? I think there is a world where the starting pitching that they have keeps them in games like we've talked about, and the offense can do just enough. And all of a sudden you squint at the standings and they get a couple of top prospects that come in, and all of a sudden it's like, okay, well, they're hanging around here. There also is a world like we've talked about, and this has been the issue with the Twins, has been injuries, obviously, to Byron Buxton, Pablo Lopez, Joe Ryan of the like. But it also, the bigger story, even though Royce Lewis gets talked about as being one of those injury guys, he played a good amount of games last year and was just bad. And Brooks Lee, who was a prospect they were really hoping to come up and do well, was just bad. And then you look at Matt Wallner, Trevor Larnach, guys that they were counting on, really didn't take the next step. And the Twins have had this issue, not in getting talented minor leaguers to the system. They've done a good job of that, but it's been getting them to take that next step at the big league level and to be consistently good. All those guys that I mentioned have had flashes in the pan, but then over a longer sample size, they really are very underwhelming. And with Luke Keyshaw, who had a really nice rookie year and is expected to be a contributor, you have Walker Jenkins, Emmanuel Rodriguez are two names to keep in mind with the lineup. If those guys come up and underwhelm and the Twins starting pitching isn't good, this team is going to win 60-some games and be a bottom dweller. If those top prospects infuse life into the lineup and the pitching goes well, then they're going to surprise some people. But so I think they're the variant team. I think I have no idea. They could be anywhere in between there, and I wouldn't be surprised. I will say, though, I think the White Sox will surprise some people because, like everybody else, I really like their offseason just for the fact of that they raised their floor. They just got some guys in there that can play and protect a little bit, and they have a lot of prospects who are knocking on the door and getting really close. So I'm very interested to see if the White Sox take that next jump.
Yeah, I'm kind of torn between Chicago and Minnesota, but I will say this about Minnesota is that it would not be the worst thing in the world, as crazy as it sounds, to bottom out this year where it's so obvious you have to sell. Like, there's no defensible argument at the deadline if you're 30 to 40 games under 500 to keep the pieces. Now, if you're 10 games under, you're 5 games under, you're 500, I could see the front office, as they've done in the past, say, we'll just stick with this group and we'll see if they can do it in the second half. And that's the last thing you want, in my opinion, because Minnesota rarely is aggressive in going for it. Therefore, sometimes with some very talented pieces they have, Joe Ryan, Pablo Lopez when healthy, and Byron Buxton, the big fish, that's where you could reload the farm system and also pair with guys like Walker Jenkins. Luke Keyshaw was phenomenal last year. There are some good pieces there in Minnesota, and the organizations that do it right are the ones in the Central that kind of identify, even though it's a weaker division, we're not going to win it. Detroit a couple of years ago, Detroit and the Royals were in the bottom of the Central, and the Royals looked at it and said, we still have Whit Merrifield, we still have Scott Barlow. We're, a few pieces away from contention, where the Tigers basically said, it ain't happening, right? We're selling off these pieces. We're going to rebuild. We're going to get high draft picks, and look where the Tigers are now. The Royals got burned by that a few years later, and they were behind Detroit because they were just too reluctant to make that big trade. And yeah, it might hurt the fan base a lot to lose Byron Buxton, to lose a Joe Ryan, but down the road, you would look back and say, I'm so glad we didn't take the best years from those players, playing on teams that were going to lose 90 to 100 games. But also in that same breath, that Minnesota, if they don't make any moves, right, they've got the pitching staff, they've got a star player in center, where the floor is higher than some teams that you really have no idea what they're going to be. But when I look at it, Minnesota fans might need to be rooting for that. Okay, we just need to pick a lane one way or the other, either really good or really bad, and that way we can know what our future holds.
Let's get out of here on the way we started with a lightning round. And we'll start with Todd. Bold prediction, Todd. 30 seconds.
Rock Chowalski will not only be the White Sox #1 pick, but he will be up by September, playing some games at the end of the year because it doesn't seem like he needs so much time in the minors. So there you go.
Wow, interesting. CJ, bold prediction for the Twins this year. 30 seconds.
Well, it's not bold to say that Joe Ryan is going to be traded at the deadline. It feels pretty inevitable. I think my bold prediction will be by the end of the season, the new ace on the Minnesota Twins pitching staff is going to be Mick Abel. He was one of the highlights of the Joan Duran trade with Philadelphia. He had a little bit of time in the majors and was okay, showed a little flashes, was very inconsistent, but has looked really strong through camp. And I think a full body of work in the Twins organization. I think by the end of the year, he's seen as the ace of their pitching staff with Joe Ryan gone.
All right, Scott, bold prediction for the Tigers. 15
Yeah, I'm going to go with the Tigers. Not only we talked about win the division, that itself is not a bold prediction, but I've been very this whole time, like, if they don't win the division, it's going to be because of the offense. If I had a bold take, it would be that the reason why the offense flourishes is because not only does Kevin McGonigle make the team, but he wins the American League Rookie of the Year. I think he is truly one of the most remarkable hitting prospects that the Tigers have literally ever had in the history of their franchise, dating back to like 50 years when Trammell and Whitaker and all them were prospects. So there's a lot riding on his shoulders. He's having an amazing spring. There might even be an opening at shortstop for him to just slide in and play right away. That is going to be my take, that the offense is good because of a rookie, believe it or not.
I am terrified of Kevin McGonigle. I have to admit. I'm also terrified of Noah Schultz and Hagen Smith coming up and facing all the Guardians left-handed hitting at some point. My bold prediction for the year is the AL Central gets 3 teams back in the American League playoffs. I think the Tigers win the division. Guardians will finish second somehow because of Guardians' Devil Magic, and then we'll get Travis Bazzana up, Chase Lauder. Maybe he'll play 80 games. I don't know. I think the Royals will also get back in the wild card too. I'm terrified of Jack Caglione. I think Carter Jensen is really slept on, and they made some good additions in the bullpen. If the pitching is healthy in Kansas City, I think they can compete. So I'm going to say, for all the hemming and hawing we do about bad off seasons and everybody in the division except for the Tigers could win 60 or 80 games, 2 years ago this division had 3 teams in the playoffs. I think we'll do it again this year. So 3 teams in the AL Central or the AL playoffs in 2026. For all division previews for the 2026 MLB season preview, subscribe to Locked On MLB on YouTube, wherever you get podcasts. For more on the Tigers, Royals, Guardians, Twins, and White Sox on YouTube, wherever you get your podcast, all part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Baseball is back. The Locked On Podcast Network presents the MLB season preview. All the biggest storylines and breakout stars for all 30 teams. Will the champs repeat, or will another team shock the league? From the experts at the Locked On Podcast Network, it's your team every day.